Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Society of Thoracic Surgeons Intermacs and Pedimacs user group webinar. Appreciate everyone who's logged on today, and it's going to be a really good webinar today. Just a brief overview of the agenda. I'm going to do our welcome and introduction to the team, over our discussion, what we're going to discuss today, an update on Intermacs version 6.0, and user feedback. Folks, before I dive into this, I want to let everyone know I'm located in Birmingham, Alabama, and so is the Intermacs DCC team. And we're in the middle of a tropical storm warning, so our power's been going in and out all morning. So if you lose us, I apologize. Just on today's call, we have Janella Miller, who's the Intermacs Data Warehouse Quality Manager. We have Jeannie Love, who's the advisor. We have Dr. Ryan Cantor, he's a statistician and director of reporting at the Intermacs DCC. Maceo Clige, I don't believe Maceo is on the phone today, but he is who you speak to about your reports. We have John Pennington, who's the senior data manager at the Intermacs Data Warehouse. We have Leanne Jones from STS. She's the STS National Database Manager for Congenital and General Thoracic Surgical Database. And Carol Crone, who's our Senior Clinical Manager of the STS National Databases. So to get started, I just want to let everyone know I want to say this before we get into our discussion, because this is going to be something we're going to touch on later in the call. So just as an update to the reports, and we touched on this a couple of webinars ago, we're going to discuss the implant discharge form today. And the STS Intermacs and Pedimacs data quality reports have added Exhibit 16, which is missing implant discharge forms. And so now you as a site can track your implant discharge form. Now remember this when we get later into the call, because we're going to be discussing the implant discharge form. Also, just briefly want to give a COVID-19 update, especially with cases surging across the country. Televisits are encouraged. The quality of life surveys may be done over the phone or by mail. If follow-up visits are done outside of the window, please enter the last date of the follow-up date visit into the database. So if you had a follow-up visit, just as an example, you had a window of April 1st to May 1st, and let's say you saw the patient May 12th, you would enter May 1st, because that would be the last date of the window for that visit, that specific Intermacs or Pedimacs follow-up visit. Sites have 30 days after the follow-up window due date to enter the data for the COVID-19 exception. And one of the things I want to talk about regarding COVID-19 is, as you know, we added fields into the Intermacs database for COVID, and just please be mindful that we have two questions. One, if they tested positive prior to admission, so it'd be prior to that implant admission, or if they tested positive during their hospital stay. Is there anything anyone from Intermacs would like to add? Okay, and you'll see multiple COVID data fields throughout the database. So as I'd mentioned earlier, we've added an exhibit in your Intermacs data quality report to discuss, to show the not completed implant discharge forms. I thought this was a really good time to discuss this, because Jeannie Ann Love and Janella have been sending out integrity checks from the Intermacs data warehouse. And frequently, and I know many of them, as I see them come across the email, is in regards to the implant discharge form. So I just want to take your questions on this and clear up any confusion. I can tell you for the implant discharge form, this form is to be completed from that primary implant visualization. It's not an explant form, even though it's labeled implant discharge form. It's not when the device gets explanted. This is simply the discharge from the implanting hospitalization. So You can see a brief overview of the form. It's going to ask during the implant hospitalization was the patient, and you're going to have options such as discharged alive with a device in place. Also going to have if the device was explanted for recovery, if the patient had died during that implant hospitalization, or the patient was transplanted. And then, yes, those are the options that you will see, or an RVAD exchange. And then you will just choose, if you choose discharged alive with the device in place, you will then be taken to patient discharged to, and you've got home residential setting, and I believe you have an outpatient care facility, and you'll have a few more options there. So this implant discharge date, this is actually, or LVAD exchange date. So this implant discharge date, it will, number one, be when the patient leaves the hospital to go to a different, to home or a different facility. So it would be when the patient is discharged from the hospital from that primary surgery, or if the patient was transplanted or died or explanted for recovery, then you would also, you would put those dates there. So again, if they were explanted for recovery, transplanted, or if they had an LVAD exchange or died, then you're going to enter that date right here. Or it's simply going to be when the patient left the hospital from the primary LVAD implant. Then you're going to scroll down and we have the acute care ICU CCU duration of post-implant stay. And then we have the intermediate and step-down care duration of post-implant stay. One of the tips for the intermediate step-down care duration of post-implant stay is stays on the regular floor count on this option 2. You'd count the duration of the post-implant stay after the ICU or CCU stay. And also another data entry tip is when completing the implant discharge form, and I've said this multiple times, but I want to go over it again, and the patient has reached an endpoint, the explant form will need to be completed in conjunction with the implant discharge form. So if the patient has died, if they were transplanted, explanted for recovery, or had an LVAD exchange during that primary implant hospitalization, then even though you complete the implant discharge form, this is not the explant form, and the forms do not communicate. Hopefully one day we can have that. But at this time, you have to go back and complete an explant form if the patient was explanted for recovery, transplanted, died, or had the LVAD exchange. You still have to complete the explant form for those endpoints and for those scenarios.
Yeah,
also, yes.
May I just add one thing here? Also, if the patient died, make sure that you complete a separate death form. Those forms don't communicate either.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very important. Thank you, Janella. Also, as most everyone knows that's been working in Intermacs entering data, when you scroll down this on the implant discharge form, you have events and procedures that have occurred. Just another tip, if the patient's returned to the OR multiple times for irrigation and debridement, on the implant discharge form, please mark surgical procedures other, then scroll down to other procedure and check other specify. In the text box, specify how many times the patient went to the OR for washout and debridement. So, you know, we have some sites that it's just their standard of care that they will keep the site opened. And then some sites, they do have to go back and do an irrigation and debridement of the land. So the next page, just some scenarios. And I'm happy to send these 2 slides out to anyone. They may be posted when in regards to the webinar. So for the implant discharge form, just a few scenarios. If a patient has an LVAD exchange during the primary implant hospitalization, then you're going to choose LVAD exchange and enter the exchange date as the discharge date. So you've got the implant discharge date would be the date of LVAD exchange. And another implant discharge form is to be generated at the new LVAD implant. An example is, you can read the examples. If a primary LVAD was implanted June 1st, 2014, June 8th, the LVAD had clotted off and the device was exchanged. The discharge reason is going to be LVAD exchange excluding RVAD, and discharge date 6/8/2014 is the date you're going to enter because that's the date it was exchanged. And then you have your the implant discharge days would be June 1st to the exchange date, June 8th. The second scenario would be a new LVAD is implanted 6/8/2014. The implant discharge form will be generated for this new LVAD. Discharge from the implant hospitalization on 6/20/2014. And the discharge reason would be patient discharged alive with the device in place. And I understand this discharge reason is the majority of our implant discharge reasons. And the discharge date would be 6/20/2014 because that's when they were discharged alive with the device in place home. In the implant discharge days, you'd count the days from 6/8/2014 to 6/20/2014. So I just want to reiterate that for the implant discharge form, the intent of this form is to capture data from when the patient is discharged from that primary LVAD hospitalization, and then if they have received a transplant, explant for recovery, death, or an LVAD exchange, then you're going to enter the date that one of those events occurred for your implant discharge date. And just a note, you do have to complete the explant form if the patient was transplanted, explanted for recovery, or had an LVAD exchange, and you would complete a death form if the patient has expired during that implanting hospitalization. So today we're going to use just some housekeeping rules. It's open discussion. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. We'll answer as many questions as possible. We encourage your feedback and want to hear from you. Before I start tackling any questions, we have some of the Intermacs and Pedimacs resources right here, the websites that you can find further information. And a recording of this webinar will be posted later this week or early next week. I can tell you, I did want to let everyone know that if you do receive the implant discharge form data integrity check from Janella or Jeannie Ann, this form is especially useful because it's very important because it actually counts your hospital days for those patients. So it's a very important form to actually complete and not be skipped. I did want to give a quick update on Intermacs version 6.0. I'll be on the lookout because you'll be receiving emails regarding announcements of the training sessions, and I will start those next week. The go live date, I believe, and John can confirm this, I believe it's November 16th. So we should be on track for that, but we're going to offer the training sessions prior to it going live this time. We're doing it a little different. We're not just going to pop it on you and say, here you go. We'll go ahead and do the training sessions before it goes live, and we'll have the updated documents and user's guide available also.
The 16th is a Monday, so I know we talked about the week of the 16th. It may be a little hard to get that scheduled for release on the Monday, but yes, the 16th is the day that we had discussed.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to go ahead and start answering some questions. Hello, 2 questions. How do we get a data analysis of quality of life? There's a few routes. If you're wanting a data, like a minor data request, and if this is something that you're going to have internally, you can just email me, and there's a quality department minor data request form that you can complete, and then we will have UAB run it. If you're looking to do a larger project, then we can connect you with the STS Research Center. Due to COVID, how do we proceed with trail making test and the 6-minute walk? Well, these both are really difficult, but however, I've had a handful of sites say with the trail making, they've FaceTimed the patient and they've really just made the best effort that they could. You know, it's really hard because with the trail making, when the patient makes an error, you're supposed to start over. So, but I say just do your best. If the patient isn't coming to clinic, if there's any way you can do it via Zoom or FaceTime, then I would suggest doing that. And for the 6-minute walk, unless the patient's going to mark it off at their home, because you've also got the gait speed test tied into that, I would just say just do the best you can. And Janella, have you heard from any sites that have ideas in performing any of these tests using telehealth?
Most people haven't been able to do it if they haven't been able to come into clinic, in my experience. Yeah.
Thanks. The next question, when patient is placed on comfort care and eventually died and did not remove or explant the device, do we need to complete explant form or just the death form? You would actually complete the explant form, and you would choose that since the device was left in, I'm assuming it was turned off. If it was turned off and left in, that's considered that the device is decommissioned. So you would choose that option on the explant form. And the reason would be withdrawal of care. And Janella, feel free to step in anytime if I've misspoken or if you need to add anything.
Oh yeah, no, that's correct. The day that the device is turned off would be the endpoint date for the patient. And then there would be a 1-year post MCS cessation form where you would enter the death after that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Patient with an LVAD is exchanged twice during one hospitalization. Should I enter 2 implant discharge forms? Since it is the durable LVAD and they are exchanged twice, it's my understanding that the implant discharge form will be generated for every LVAD, but is that correct?
That's right. It will be per device. So if they had 2 LVAD exchanges, that would mean they actually had 3 LVADs in. So you would need to complete 1 implant discharge form for each of the LVADs to tell what happened during that implant hospital stay and how many days they were on that specific device.
Thank you, Janella. The next question, when a patient's adverse event is rehospitalization and the only intervention is feeding him medication, do we put medication under other procedure? I need more details. Like, does the patient have a feeding tube and that's how you're having to give him the medication? I need some more details. But I would document that there, medication under, I would say feeding him medication under the other procedure. Will a surgeon worksheet be available for 6.0? I added 6.0 because I'm just assuming that's what Carol's talking about. Yes, we are working on some surgeon worksheets that you will be able to give out to your surgeons. And Claire wants to know, where do we sign up for the training? I had mentioned earlier, we will send emails. You'll be on the lookout for emails for the Intermacs 6.0 training session. Or if you want to email me, I can just add you to the list. And then I will give you the dates and times that we're offering the training sessions. Is there a chart or graph that shows the expected outcome survival for patients with each Intermacs score? Ryan, do you have anything to say on this one? Do we
I was
have
just
any
looking through the QA report. There might not be an actual exhibit on that, which is kind of surprising. I know we have tons of Kaplan-Meier curves in there. There may not be. And if there's not, and there's general interest, it could be something we could add, but we need those addition requests to go through STS and the appropriate channels.
Sure. So, Marla, if you just email me, and we have a running list and we do updates to the reports. We meet probably a couple of times a year to review all the suggestions to update the reports. The next question, when completing an explant form at endpoint, example death, for the forms that don't speak to one another, if patient expires during the index hospitalization, does that get flagged during integrity checks? Or should we go back and review cases where the patient expired during initial implant to confirm both forms were completed? Janella and Jeannie Ann, I think at this point you're more familiar with the integrity checks than I am.
Sure, I can answer that. If they do select the patient died during the implant hospitalization on the implant discharge form and there is no death form completed, then we will send a query. So it does get flagged on the integrity checks. So there's no need for you to go back. We will catch those and get in touch with you.
To add to that too, this is John. We flag those also on any of the adverse events. If there's any adverse event that says it results in death, we also check that.
Yes.
Thank you both. The next question, Intermacs 6.0 go live is 11/16/2020 or 2021? It's 11/16/2020. As John mentioned, that is a Monday. So I'm not for sure they can push it out on a Monday. So it could be the Friday before the 16th or possibly the 17th, but it will definitely be no later than the week of the 16th. Under the dilated vena cava question, if the vena cava is not dilated, but there is variation by echo, do we still check no? Yes, I believe I actually would probably need to take this back to Dr. Pagani because there's two parts of this question. So I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Janella, do you have any insight?
I don't. I'd have to look and see if I've been asked this before. I don't know right off the top of my head either.
Okay. So if you can, Sherry, if you can just email me directly, or Jeannie Ann and Janella, then they can forward it to me and we can ask. I'm thinking since it all needs to be there to answer yes, but I could be wrong. Can I please have your email? I'm interested in obtaining a data analysis survey from our centers. Yes. My email, it's kholyfield@sts.org. I don't believe I put that on the last slide, but kholyfield@sts.org. And that looks like, Carol, it looks like we're all done with our questions for today. There are no more.
Okay, I thought that was this is Carol. I thought that was a really interesting and educational webinar. Catherine and Janella and Jeananne. And the other UAB, our other UAB team. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Again.
Oh, sorry, Catherine.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Put your email in the chat box for folks to see.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We did have a couple questions come in the chat box, but I think everybody resubmitted them into the Q&A, so it looks like you got through everything.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining. Again, Exhibit 16 on your data quality reports, where you're going to find those missing implant discharge forms. We really need those completed and submitted because, again, that's how we calculate, Intermacs calculates your hospital days. Very important factor for these patients. We're happy you can contact, like I said, Janella, Jeannie, or I, and we're happy to answer any of your questions. And thank you for joining today.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.